Hi there, this is Justin Krane, certified financial planner professional and founder of Krane Financial Solutions. Welcome to Money You Got This. Money, right? It's not just about return on investment, it's about return on life. It's about making financial decisions that make you feel like you could have the best life ever.
Krane Financial is an SEC-registered investment advisor. However, such registration does not imply a certain level of skill or training, and no inference to the contrary should be made. A copy of our current written disclosure statement discussing our advisory services and fees is available upon request. Information contained herein is for informational and illustrative purposes only, and general in nature. It should not be considered specific financial planning or investment advice, or a recommendation to buy or sell any type of securities or other investment products.
How you doing, my man?
I am fantastic. Justin, thanks so much for having me on the show. We're going to talk about money.
We're going to talk about money and marketing. Like, I'm psyched you're listening to the show. I want to give you this free report. 3 things multimillionaires do to grow their wealth. Just go to coolmoneyshow.com to grab it. That's coolmoneyshow.com to grab it. Thanks. It's about return on life. I loved utility. That was my favorite one. Tons of notes, great, action plans for me and stuff like that. My first question for you is why are you doing this? Like, why are you doing marketing? Why are you into the customer experience? Why are you still doing this? What got you into it?
I can't help myself. Like, I started in politics. Okay. So that was my original career. I was a political campaign manager, and that's kind of how I got into it. And it really fascinated me because it taught me, I was a political science major, and it taught me sort of the psychology of why people do stuff, why they buy, why they vote, which are very similar. And I really like it. I like the anthropology of it and the sociology of it and the challenge of it, especially on the marketing side, because it changes so frequently now in ways that it didn't when I first got started. So every day is a different day, and you never really have an answer in marketing. You just have today's answer. So it's intellectually satisfying in that way. And I spend a lot of my time now writing books and giving speeches. We have a big consulting firm as well, but I spend a lot of my time doing that. And all I really ever wanted to do was be a teacher. Like, my parents are both teachers, and my mom and my stepdad are teachers. And I realize now that I am a teacher, I just reach a lot more people than they ever could in a classroom. So I'm just kind of teaching on stage and teaching on the page and trying to help people improve their businesses.
You started in politics.
Yeah.
How did you go from that to what you're doing now? Like, what was the first step that you took?
I quit politics. That was step number 1 because I liked it, but it's not a great gig, man. It's a little rough. Hours are not great. And I just gotten married, and we were thinking about starting a family, and it's just not a good family gig at all. So I left and I started working for a corporation in traditional marketing, right? So I'm like, look, if I can get somebody elected, I was looking for waste management, the environmental guys. I'm like, if I can get somebody elected, I can sell garbage pickup. Like, I'm convinced that I can make that happen. So I worked in a traditional, corporate marketing department for a couple years. And then I left there and got involved in digital marketing way, way, way back so long ago that when I started in digital marketing, domain names were free. Like, you could buy any domain name you wanted and to be like, okay, here you go. True story, Justin, you'll appreciate this. Talk about a missed opportunity as it relates to money. My partner and I, in my first internet company, sold Budweiser.com to Anheuser-Busch for 50 cases of beer.
Oh my God.
And but at the time, it seemed like actually a pretty good deal because that was a lot of beer. I was 23 and I was the senior partner at that point. So our decision-making was possibly skewed by young man's priorities, but really there wasn't, nobody even wanted a website. So we're like, sure, we'll sell it. So it's been a long time since then, 25 years.
So you left politics to go corporate to do marketing there.
Yeah.
And you had to have thought through the financial aspect of that. Like, okay, I'm married with kids or about to have kids. Did you think about going out on your own first? Or were you like, look, I got to get a steady gig to support myself?
It's a great question. It's a great question that I get rarely asked. For sure. For this reason, I'm a 7th generation entrepreneur. So in my house, it wasn't like, should you do your own thing? It was just, when are you going to do your own thing and what will it be? Like, it was never even, nobody even like sat me down and said, this is how we operate in the Baer household. It was just like, every generation does their own thing. That's just how it is, right? So it was never really a question. But what happened was, when I got out of politics, I got into corporate market, they were paying me pretty good, right? And a steady gig. And I had, a family, I wanted to start a family. I'm like, they're paying me pretty well. And then I was in a different corporate job, like, they're still paying me pretty well. And so I wanted to start my own thing for a while, but I didn't, because I was like, why take the risk? And I'll tell you the story, if you got a minute, exactly how this happened.
Well, let me say why I'm asking this, because there are so many people who read your books, who will listen to this podcast, who are doing two things. They're trying to bridge the gap, and they want to implement the things that you're teaching, but they're like, how am I going to make this work financially? I have to somehow bring in more to do these things, to implement. And I think if they hear it from you, who's done it, I mean, like, granted, you're way farther along in your career than you were when you first made that move.
That's for sure.
Something had to give you a trigger to bail.
It was literally, this is what happened. So my best friend, who married my wife's sister, so my best friend became my brother-in-law, which I totally recommend if you can pull that off. It's awesome.
Okay. All right.
If you can socially engineer that, I recommend it. I was 30 years old, and he was 30, everybody was 30. And he called me and said, they just diagnosed me with brain cancer. And I walked in the next day and I quit, and I started my own company, and I haven't worked for anybody since that day. That's the real story. Wow. A lot of the questions. Because what I realized, Justin, was I was scared, right? I was scared to take the risk. I was scared to do my own thing. And what he taught me in that moment was, what am I really scared of? Like, if this doesn't work out, like if I start my own company, or I take the risk, or I do the expansion and it doesn't work out, like, what's the worst scenario for me? I'll go get a job as somebody else's marketing guy. Like, I have an employable set of skills, right? So my downside is actually pretty limited. And what it taught me, and I tell people this all the time, what it taught me to do is to dimensionalize my fear. If you want to do something, but you're not doing it, and you're like, I don't know, write it down. Grab a piece of paper and literally name your fears. Write down what is bugging you. And once you put it on paper, as I did that day, I'm like, well, wait a second, this isn't that big of a deal. I'm not going to die of brain cancer. Worst case scenario, I'll go get another job. Yeah. And that changed my whole life. Like, literally, that call changed my entire life.
Wow. I ask that question to a lot of my clients. Like, if you had one day to live, the doctor tells you, you're going to die tomorrow. You begin to think, what did I not do? Who did I not get to be? What did I not become? And then you begin to think about regret. And it is unfortunate that when we hear about death experiences or near death, whatever, we have a completely different outlook on things. So,
it literally happened to me last week. My dad has been sick for a long time. And we thought he was going to have until Christmas. And then he called and said, I got a day. Like, literally what you just said happened to me Monday. Like, literally, like, we thought we had 4 months and we had 48 hours. So you never know, man. You gotta take advantage of your opportunities when you can.
Yeah. I can relate to that. My father recently passed away, and it's a completely new paradigm that you're in when you lose that protective layer.
It's great to have, podcasts like this and colleagues and people you rely on, but it's different when it's your dad, because that's the person that you're always like, all right, I can always count on this person to give me some advice, and that person doesn't need a whole backstory. Like, they know already the deal. And so, not having that, although, I think over time you rely on that guidance less and less, but not having it and not being able to get it when you need it is, it's kind of it's just a shake up for sure.
So, talk to me about going out on your own, and the whole issue of succeeding, failing, trying things. It didn't work. This worked. How did that work for you?
I got lucky. Well, I don't know if it's luck, but I had a plan. So my plan was this. I was fortunate in that I knew a lot of people. I was living in Phoenix at this time, And I knew a lot of people because I've been active in the business community, while I was employed in other people's jobs, and I was in clubs and organizations and a pretty good networker. So I sat down and I telephoned. This is an age when you would use the telephone for things. And I phoned every single person I knew. It took me about 3 weeks. And I literally called every person I knew. And I said, hey, it's Jay. And I've started this new company to help organizations figure out how to be better at the internet. If you need any help, I'm available. And if you know anybody who needs help, please let them know that I'm available. And I spent 3 weeks calling about 300 people. And at the end of that 3 weeks, I had 3 clients, which is enough to pay my mortgage, and I was off and running. And that's really how I did it. And then I spent the next 4 years going to 4 networking events a week of different kinds every week for 4 years. I mean, I basically built my reputation on chicken strips and Bud Light. I mean, that was literally it. Like, I mean, every night I would be somewhere talking to people.
So you put yourself out there.
Yeah. I mean, it worked out well too, because I ended up being a professional speaker at the time. I was just a guy who would hang out at networking events and talk to people, and it ended up being a really good, I didn't realize it at the time, but it was a really good training ground.
So how did you manage the goal of bringing in business and then servicing the business that you brought in?
Yeah, that's such a great question, because at the beginning, that really is the kind of plate spinning and the time allocation, resource allocation is the hardest thing. Because if you quit spinning one of the plates, you're in really big trouble. You lose all the clients, or you don't get any new clients. And it was a challenge. It really was. And still, I mean, even today, where you're a much larger organization, many millions of dollars a year, it's still a challenge for me, like, of where to spend my time, because there are a lot of options for where to spend my time. What I tried to do was take the approach, I'd never want to lose a client. So for me, it's all, if you say, okay, I could do X or Y, if X is take care of current clients and Y is go get new clients, I'm always going to go with X, because it's so much more expensive to replace a client than it is to take care of a client. So I feel like that's one of the mistakes people make in business. And in fact, my book, Hug Your Haters, talks about this a lot, this idea that we underinvest in customer retention, and correspondingly, we tend to overinvest in customer acquisition. Yeah. We are generally speaking too okay, actually, with customer churn. Like, well, we lose these guys, we'll get another one. We'll lose these guys, get another one. You end up on this treadmill, and it ends up being a very slow growth treadmill. And I think most business people would be better off if they said, well, what if we never lost a customer? And then we just added a few here or there. That's actually a better growth trajectory than kind of, 2 steps forward and 1.5 steps back, which is typically how it works.
Yeah. I talk a lot about that with the people that I work with about lifetime value of a customer. Yeah. I actually think of it differently. It's just the present value of future cash flows. Like, if you know you're going to keep your client for a super duper long time, you just take what they're going to pay you, in year 2, year 3, year 4, all the way. You just put a present value on it with a little bit of inflation, and then boom, you now know how much that's worth if you lose them. And then you can do all sorts of things with them. You can measure that against how much it's going to cost you to go buy one. It really validates what you're saying about losing one and how important that is to keep them. I want to go back and ask you about the challenge actually that you're having right now. I mean, it's not like, Jay, you're the only one that's having a challenge. Like, we all have challenges in business. So how are you dealing with, we'll fast forward to today, you speak, you write books, you have some one-on-one clients. How are you balancing, and I know that you have a team, and most people will have some sort of team, but how are you balancing still taking care of X and trying to grow Y?
Yeah, it is a challenge. And there's 14 of us on my team. We're virtual across the US. And the good news is that they are extraordinary. Every single one of them are extraordinary, which is why they're on the team. And so that really helps. But I'll tell you what we try to do every year. We only meet one time a year. We have one meeting a year, which is kind of crazy to think of, but we have one meeting a year in my company. And we have 4 phone calls a year where everybody's together. It's a very self-directed organization, which is why I built it that way. One of the things we do in our annual meeting, which is like a multi-day strategic planning session, is we kind of audit my time and say, what is Jay spending time on? We keep track of it, right? So speaking versus writing versus new business versus client acquisition versus consulting, all this stuff that I do, admin, accounting, finance, whatever. And then we say, we must replace 15% of that. Somebody else has to take 15% of that. And we do it every single year. We're now on our 10th year. We just had our 10th anniversary. And if every single year you say, here's 15% of the stuff I'm spending my time on that somebody else could do just as well, and you do that over and over and over, it's almost like when you make a sauce, like a reduction sauce on the oven, what happens is your time becomes really concentrated and really valuable. So what I always tell my clients and entrepreneurs is, wherever possible, only spend your time on the things that you are uniquely qualified to do.
Sure.
Uniquely qualified. So I've got an incredible group of people, but I'm the only one who can do this podcast. And that's why I'm the one doing this podcast, right? So there's a lot of people on my team who could send invoices, which is why I don't send invoices.
Sure. Yeah. Got it. You said that you hired great people. How do you hire great people?
We have a very specific culture, as I said, because it is so virtual and it can't be, if you need a lot of oversight, it's just not going to work for us. So we have a screening process. Most of our people come as referrals from current team members or people I know in the business community who say, this person is the right kind of person for Jay's company. And they'll call me and say, hey, I've got somebody for you. Everybody in our organization is a refugee of sorts. They came from a big agency, a big marketing agency, or a big company. So ex-Google, ex-Disney, that kind of thing. And they just want to get off that treadmill and have a different lifestyle. So we take people who have that kind of big client, big circumstance chops, but want to live differently, right? So a lot of the people on our team are moms, are younger moms, 30-year-old moms who don't want to do 80 hours a week anymore. They want to have a more normal schedule. And so we provide that to them. And then I talk to everybody extensively and try and get a feel for them. Then our chief operating officer talks to them, and then we give them a homework assignment. And I learned this years ago, and I think it's really important. We make everybody who we're thinking about hiring do a pretend project, and a pretty in-depth pretend project. We're like, okay, like what we typically do for strategists is we'll give them one of our recent strategic plans. We'll NDA them just to protect our clients, but a recent strategic plan, which might be 100 pages. And we say, you got 2 days to read this, analyze it, and tell me what you do better. Now, you learn two things. One, that's a lot of work to do for free in 48 hours. So you learn how bad they want to work with us. And two, just by them analyzing our work and saying, you know what, this is really good, but I think this can be better, you learn an awful lot about how they think and whether they can add something to the team or whether they're giving us something that we already have. So that's been a really good way of screening people.
So you're not doing like the traditional interview, giving them some sort of personality, strengths, weakness.
Nah, I don't care.
Whatever. None of that.
Yeah, I can figure it. I mean, I've done this so long. I don't need to give them a DISC assessment. Like, I can have a conversation with them and kind of know whether they're going to fit in with the organization. That part I forego. Not that I don't believe in those kind of tests. I think they're great, but it's a small enough company, and it's so personality driven that I can usually figure it out without those.
That's amazing. All right. So let me just go back to one thing, because there's so many business owners that struggle with momentum. So you leave corporate America, you call your 300 people, you eat chicken strips and beer, you begin to bring in clients, and you gain some traction. Mm-hmm. How did you sustain that? How did you sustain the momentum? Because so many times in business, we have a win and then we rest on our laurels and we don't do anything after that. So is it just your drive, or did you just like were you like just driven to continue?
Totally. I mean, I wish I had a system that I could share with your audience, but it's a total personality trait. And it is the most good news, bad news thing you can imagine. Mm-hmm. The good news is I am never satisfied. The bad news is the same. I mean, like by any objective measure, like I've got a pretty good thing going here. Just got inducted into the Professional Speakers Hall of Fame, multiple New York Times bestselling books, big consulting company, blah, 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 amazing kids, amazing family. But I am never satisfied in a way that's frankly unhealthy. And so there's sometimes I wish I could not be that way, but it's just how I'm wired, right? And it sometimes frustrates my team because I'm not one to like, let's celebrate all our successes. I'm always like, why isn't this right? It's just how I am. I'll put it to you this way. We have had across now 3 companies in a row that I've owned, because I started one, sold it, started another one, sold it, started this one. We have had an increasing top line revenue number every year for 18 years in a row.
That's amazing.
So now I can't not do that, right? Like now if I don't do that, I'm like, what is going on? This guy is falling.
You're going to be like Amazon or Microsoft or Google, just keep growing and you're going to be huge.
That's, even though, and I don't want to be huge. Like that's the weird part about it. Like, I don't really care about that. It's just kind of become a thing. Like, we're not trying to be big at all. We just want to be the best at what we do. Like, we purposely keep the company smaller than it could be. Like, we turn down a ton of work because we don't want to be a big organization. And I think that's one of the keys too, is like, I'm not very good at goal setting, specific goals. It's like, I'm not really good at that, but I do have a good idea of what I want. Right. And I didn't start this company to become the companies that I had in the past, which are more traditional, larger organizations with an office and an HR department and an elevator. I didn't start this company to do that. So I've got a real keen understanding of when we're kind of losing what makes us different and special. And so I tend to put the brakes on our growth a little bit from time to time as a result of that, because I think you got to know what you like and you got to know what you don't like. And it's not always about bigger.
Yeah.
And as you know, Justin, one of the things I've learned, growing some companies in the past is that, top line doesn't equal bottom line. Like, there's a lot of companies that grow and they, as you grow, you're making less, not more. And that can be frustrating. Like, that's one of the most frustrating things in business. You're like, we're getting bigger, but we're not making any more money, because at that size, you get in that sort of awkward teenager size. You got to start adding middle managers and other, stuff that isn't really revenue producing to sort of keep the lights on. And then you're like, dude, where did all of our cash go? And it's like, you're just, and you got to blow through that. And once you go through that, then you get into an economy of scale again. But in the middle is like, it's like Death Valley. It's terrible.
Vortex. Yeah. So have your businesses, or let's look at this one, as you've added people to your team, still been able to sustain the profitability, or did you have to take 1 or 2 steps back to hire this person, or did you bring in enough business based on those hires to cover them and then some?
Really good question. Generally speaking, we've been really lucky in that regard, but it's not so much of a linear, we added this person and we were able to pay for them. I mean, it's one company, but we've got 3 very distinct revenue streams that are about equal size. So we have the consulting business, we have the media business, which is, we have lots of sponsors for our content. So my podcast, my blog, all that, we have corporate sponsors for that work. So we've got the consulting business, the media business, and then the speaking business, and they're all about the same size. So what we try to do is, because the way that's the cash is spread, even if we don't fully have the revenue booked to bring on somebody else, as long as we've got about 30% of that cost covered, we'll bring them on, because we figure we'll grow into it eventually. Right. And I feel like, especially in a professional services model like mine, most people get in trouble because they hire too slow. They want to have that person fully paid for, but the problem is, while you're getting to that point, you're stressing your team out to the max, and client satisfaction goes down as a result, right? And so you might have finally gotten to the point where you can hire Susie, but everybody's ready to kill you in the interim, right? So I feel like, have the confidence to hire a little early. And what I find is that once you get that extra resource, everybody takes the kettle off boil, does better work, and you naturally grow into it.
Yeah, love it. So what do you think your best money move has been since you've been on your own?
I think more than most people who do what I do, it is multiple revenue streams, right? So there's three kind of core ones in the company. We also have a courses business, which generates some revenue. I've got a real estate business. I do a lot of angel investing business and a bunch of other stuff. So we've got, we could have a colossal failure in one part of the business and it wouldn't really matter because we have so many legs in the stool. And as somebody who grew up with a father who was a financial planner, like I had variable universal life insurance when I was like 4 years old, man. So like I was taught these things at a very early age. I had no choice. So having multiple revenue streams and really diversification, I think is probably the best thing that I've done.
Yeah, that's awesome. One of the things that I work on with clients and encourage just people to do is when they have those revenue streams, when they show up on the P&L, to have them as line items for each of those three and not just lumped into one that says income. Because then you have no transparency on where anything is coming from. And it's very, very hard to plan.
That's actually one of the most important things we've done in the last 3 years is that, because we used to just count everything as income. And now, because we really do have three totally separate divisions, breaking those out has really, really helped to see kind of what's really contributing to the success of the organization. What we're doing now, which is a little harder, is also allocating the expenses accordingly, right? And sometimes it's a little tricky, like, all right, how do you allocate my time across three divisions? How do you allocate this particular software across three divisions? You got to kind of take a crack at it and just sort of say, yeah, that feels about right. It's not going to be exact, but it really does help to understand your actual profitability at sort of the job or the service level. Because one of the things that's always true in professional services is that, on any particular job, like you might make money, but if it takes you too long to deliver, you're also losing your ass, right? So, you can have, and I used to, back in the day, I was in the web design business, and that was so true there, right? You'd have four projects where you're making money, and one that was Vietnam, right? Where you're just like, oh my God, we are hemorrhaging cash because, this client has asked for 17 rounds of changes or whatever. And you're like, you're losing money every day. And that's just one of the hard parts about this kind of business.
Yep. I'm with you, brother. So let's transition into now, like, more about what it is that you do.
Yeah.
So marketing and money. I have seen at different points in time, some big companies and some entrepreneurs view marketing as an expense and not as an investment. And I think that's one of the biggest mistakes business owners make when they're looking at marketing. They don't have a vision and they don't know where it's going to go. And they might start for like 5 minutes or 5 months and then bail because they don't see anything through. What do you think about that? And when you're working with clients, do they not view it as an investment? Even big ones, I got to believe even big ones too might not think of it like that. So how do you bridge that gap for them and get them to see that they can have some serious results if they listen to you?
It's exactly right. The challenge is that some companies still are not very good at measuring marketing impact. And consequently, if you don't have the capability to measure the effectiveness of marketing, you're basically just going to tell yourself whatever story you want to tell yourself about marketing, and that story will become true. As my friend Tom Webster always says, the plural of anecdote is not data. And many times people tell themselves anecdotes about the effectiveness of marketing. Well, this one guy told me that he doesn't like our trade show booth, or this one guy told Jimmy in sales that he saw our magazine ad, or whatever. That's not a report. That's a story. And a story is not data. So the companies that actually take the time to measure their marketing and figure out, okay, amongst the people who consume this marketing, this many called us, or this many walked in the door, or this many filled out the form. Here's how many of those people became customers. And now in an era where marketing is increasingly digital, that kind of measurement's much easier than it's ever been. Those are the kind of companies that are very sophisticated and frankly okay with making that marketing investment because they know it pays off and they know exactly how much it pays off. When people are just winging it and hoping for the best, well then you can decide to cut marketing in a second. I'll tell you that one of my favorite stories, I was at an advertising club event. I was just a kid, man. I was 22, 24, something like that, in Phoenix. And the guest speaker was Herb Kelleher, who was the founder of Southwest Airlines.
Yeah.
And he's on stage smoking cigarettes, drinking whiskey. I mean, like right out of Central Casting, man. It was crazy. Yeah. And he told me something that I'll never forget. He said, when business is bad, we advertise more. And I'm like, yep, he gets it. Right. And the first reaction for most business people when things are bad is, let's stop advertising. And then you're definitely not going to get any customers because not only is the economy bad, but nobody knows about you. And that's when smart competitors double down on advertising and they take a larger share of the market, and you never get it back. Like my dad used to own a restaurant. In addition to being a financial planner, he was a restaurant owner. And he used to tell me this story all the time, that, we lived in Arizona. And so Arizona is a very economically cyclical, state, very much so, one of the most. And when times were good, everything was fine. But when times were bad, every restaurant in town would raise their prices because they couldn't make ends meet. And he would lower prices and he'd take all the customers. And he's like, I can't wait for the next downturn because I take all the customers. Yeah.
Well, the thing is, you have to have enough cash for profitability, even to sustain that.
Of course.
When you're lowering prices. But no, I get it. But here's what I see. I mean, I see this all of the time. Business owners are not measuring their marketing. They don't know how to measure it. If it's not digital, I mean, digital, yes, you can do, but a bus bench, or, I mean, I'm just looking at, your new book, Talk Triggers. You're talking about word of mouth being directly responsible for 19% of all purchases. And then, so how do you measure? First of all, so many business owners are not, and people are not measuring their marketing ROI. They're not. What would you say to them?
Well, if you stipulate to the fact that marketing works and you're going to continue to invest in marketing, it's because you have a good feeling about it working, fine. But if you're one of those people, and there's many people out there who have to have it proven to them, well, then you have to make the investment in measuring your marketing. See, it's not that marketing isn't measurable. It's that you actually have to do work to measure it, right? So if you want to know, what the bus bench gets you, like, I can tell you that, but it's going to cost you some time and money to figure that out, right? So the question becomes, and this is going to sound ridiculous, but it's 100% true. You have to ask yourself, what is the ROI of precisely knowing your ROI? Because you have to actually, if you want to know what the bus bench results are, you have to have a tracking phone number on the bus bench. That phone number only rings if somebody sees it on the bus bench. So that's going to cost you a little money on phone number. They have to track that. Like, I can totally tell you how to measure all that stuff, but it's not free, right? So you can't have it both ways, right? You can't have certainty and no cost. You can pick one of those.
Yeah. My point is I think a lot of business owners don't even care to measure the ROI on their own marketing.
Which is fine, but then you can't bitch that your marketing is not working. You don't get that choice either, right? Again, if you're either part of the problem or you're part of the solution. When it comes to marketing effectiveness.
So now let's relate that into like your core stuff, which is, customer experience. Like, I just love that. I love your stuff on customer experience.
Thanks.
What do you think the relationship is between the customer experience, profits, and just momentum there? I mean, you write so much about that. I think it's your best stuff. Talk to us about that. And then your new book, Talk Triggers.
I think it's important to think of customer experience two ways. One, customer experience keeps your customers. They have a good experience, so they don't leave. They come back again. And that is a very economically consequential circumstance. All the data show that even a 5% increase in customer retention can increase profits by 25% or more because of the compounding effect of customer acquisition. You don't have to spend more money to replace those customers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? So retention and churn reduction is really important, and experience is a big part of that. However, customer experience can also create customers in a way that we don't think about very often. And usually that's because of word of mouth, which is the new book that I just published called Talk Triggers. The idea there is if you do something in your operations that your customers do not expect and they notice it, they will tell other people about this weird little thing that you do. And then that brings you new customers, because really the best way to grow any business for your customers to do that growing for you. But we assume in business all the time that competency creates conversation, that the key to word of mouth is to just run a good business. But that doesn't actually work, not very well, because guess what? All your competition is good too. Otherwise, they would not be in business. And we don't really talk about things that are good. We talk about things that are unexpected. Like, I don't know everybody listening. I probably know some of your listeners, but I tell you this. Nobody ever says, hey, let me tell you about this perfectly adequate experience I just had. Right? Because that's a terrible story. That's not a story worth telling. Like, nobody's like, oh, yeah, great. Sit around the campfire and tell me your tale. Like, it's not interesting. So what you've got to do is in the operations of your business. And again, this is more about operations than marketing. In the operations of your business, do one thing consistently that your customers don't expect, and they will tell that story to one another. And that's how your experience can bring you new customers at essentially no cost, because your customers become volunteer marketers on your behalf.
So for all of the people that teach you how to get referrals, right?
Mm-hmm.
What you're basically saying is, yeah, you can do that, but augment that with something in your operations that's the keyword unexpected to your customer.
Talkable. Something that's talkable.
And then they will volunteer that information to everyone that they know without you having to do that same stuff.
That's exactly it. And it doesn't have to be hard. I'll give you an example. There's this one's not even in the book because I learned about it after the book was written. There's a doctor in Seattle, Washington. He's a surgeon. He's a very special kind of surgeon, though, because he only does the vasectomy procedure. He is a vasectomy surgeon. That's all he does. His name is Dr. Snip. Now, that's pretty funny and pretty hilarious, but that's not actually his talk trigger, okay? His talk trigger works like this, Justin. Every patient on the way out the door, they get like the insurance paperwork and like get the frozen bag of peas or whatever. They get all that stuff, pieces of paper. But then every patient on the way out the door gets a small box, and inside that box is an engraved silver pocket knife. And on that pocket knife, it says Dr. Snip vasectomy surgeon. Now you can imagine you're playing golf, you're watching football, you're on your boat, whatever, and you're with your friends and you open a beer and your buddy's like, Justin, where'd you get that sweet knife? You're like, where'd I get this knife? I got it from Dr. Snip vasectomy surgeon. Now, if you've had a vasectomy recently, who else is likely to need a vasectomy? All of your friends? That's an amazing talk trigger.
Yeah. The thing is how do you come up with these unexpected ideas?
That's why I wrote a book. That's why I wrote a whole book about it. There's a ton of books already about word of mouth, and a lot of them are really good. But what we've never had ever is a book that says word of mouth is important, and here's why, and then here's the exact system for how to do it. So in our book, Talk Triggers, that I wrote with my buddy Daniel Lemon, it's a 6-step process of exactly how to figure this out, exactly how to test it, exactly how to measure it, exactly how to pay for it, exactly what to do if somebody steals your idea. All the stuff you need to know is in the book. But the key to it, the first part of the system, I won't go into all the steps, it'll take forever, but the first part of it is to actually talk to customers. And you do a bunch of customer interviews, actually telephone or face-to-face conversations with customers. And what you're trying to figure out from them is that every touch point, every time they intersect with your business, in person, website, whatever, what do they expect? Like if you ask somebody who comes out of a vasectomy clinic, what do you expect on the way out the door? Well, I expect to pay or give you my insurance card. I expect you to give me some post-operative instructions and that's it, right? That's what I expect. What you don't expect is somebody to give you a silver pocket knife. So when you know what your customers expect, you by definition know what they do not expect. And that gap, the difference between what they expect and what they don't expect, that's where the talk trigger lies. That's where the gold is. So you just want to map all those expectations and then find something that they don't see coming. And what's interesting about it is in many cases, the stuff that's the most boring that you put a little twist on works the best, right? It doesn't have to be like something crazy. It's just something small that you put a twist on. They're like, oh, that's awesome.
I gotta also believe, because I've seen a lot of your examples are for product-based business owners and companies, that this can equally work well for service-based providers where they don't have a product that they can somehow.
Probably better. And I say that because typically there's a lot less perceived differentiation amongst service providers. Like if I say, line me up 10 accountants, consumers are going to say, yeah, they all do the same thing, right? In fact, I was in Indianapolis recently doing a presentation and found an example of a CPA firm that has a talk trigger. And it's one of the 5 talk trigger types that we investigate in the book. It's talkable speed. So their deal is every time somebody calls, they answer it on the first ring. If somebody emails them, they reply in 5 minutes. An accounting firm. And if you look in their Google reviews, every single review is like, I cannot believe how fast they got back to me. I cannot believe how fast they got back to me. Like that is their thing. That is their differentiator. So it can totally work. Like you just have to figure out how to do it.
Well, Jay, this is awesome, man. It's been great to have you on. I think you're great. You just keep going.
Thank you.
Keep going. Keep being you. I have one last question because I saw it on video. And I just think it's cool for like the parents of us out there. What do your kids make of everything that you're doing? Like they're teenagers. They're millennials.
Yeah.
They're in their 20s. Right?
Well, my daughter's 20. She's a sophomore in college. And my son is 17, is a senior in high school. Yeah. My daughter is an advertising major. And so she's done some work for us at Convince to Convert, my consulting firm. So she certainly understands kind of what's up a little bit. My son's kind of a different career path, so hasn't spent as much time with our company per se. But they've seen me on stage and they know about the books and all those kind of things. But I think to some degree they're like whatever, like
what I'm getting at is you've written multiple New York Times best-selling books. You've bought and sold 3 companies. You have a big, good, solid brand. You've modeled a lot of great stuff for them, and they had to have learned a few things from you indirectly.
I hope so. I'm probably learned some bad things too, but that's kind of the way it goes.
What do you think about that?
I think time will tell, and I think I want them to do whatever they want to do. I feel like the key, despite all the things we've talked about here, to business success is for it not to feel like a job, right? Like, I would do this for free. Like, I'm really glad I don't have to, but I would do this for free. And the second that's no longer the case is the second I quit. And I keep telling them the same thing. I'm like, find out what you love and do that, because if you love it, you'll be good at it. And if you're good at it, you'll figure out how to make money at it.
Great. That's awesome. Well, thanks again for coming on.
You bet. My pleasure.
And do we need to, Talk Triggers is your new book that you have out?
Talk Triggers is talktriggers.com, which is the website for the book. Tons of free stuff there. All kinds of like infographics, discussion guides, PowerPoint presentations, videos, all kinds of stuff for free. I'll also tell you the book itself has a talk trigger, right? It'd be weird if a book about talk triggers didn't have a talk trigger. And the talk trigger works like this, Justin. Anybody who buys the book, if they don't like it, pretty sure you will, but if you don't like it, if you go to the website and leave me a note, my co-author and I will buy you any other book that you want. If you want like a first edition Bible, we'll figure it out. We'll make it happen. So literally, there is no risk. You could actually make money buying this book if you choose to. So there's no reason for you not to buy it, because if you don't like it, I'll take care of it.
Amazing. Great to have you on. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. We'll do it again sometime. Thanks so much.
You got it. Have a question? Want to get in touch with us? Need some help and advice with your finances? Just go to coolmoneyshow.com and reach out to us. That's coolmoneyshow.com.
Krane Financial Solutions is an SEC registered investment advisor. However, such registration does not imply a certain level of skill or training, and no inference to the contrary should be made. A copy of our current written disclosure statement discussing our advisory services and fees is available upon request. Information contained herein is for informational and illustrative purposes only and general in nature. It should not be considered specific financial planning or investment advice, or a recommendation to buy or sell any type of securities or other investment products. No investment decision should be made based solely on any information provided herein. We do not provide legal, accounting, or tax services. We recommend that all investors seek out the services of competent professionals in any of the aforementioned areas. Certain information provided has been obtained from third-party sources that we believe reliable. However, it's not been independently verified and is not guaranteed.